Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Double Down, the live online news and affairs programme that puts people first. It's Thursday the 20th of May 21. We're broadcasting as usual from Dublin, Dundalk and Longford live, and we're your hosts Finbar Markey and Anna Kavanagh. Welcome to the show everyone. What a busy week it's been in politics, especially in Ireland. Tonight we're going to be just as busy. Anna Kavanagh is joined by campaigners who feel that the secondary school English curriculum has concerning levels of obscenity. I'll be talking with the Tracy brothers to update us on the campaign to stop the gold mining company Dalridian damaging their environment, their community and their health. Anna will also bring you her usual news and views, but first, a fast and furious breakdown of the news that you won't see on TV. In Irish news first, an ex-employees of Debenhams who have been campaigning for a fair redundancy package for 406 days, today voted for a deal to end their campaign and striking actions, such as blocking the removal of Debenhams stock. Workers voted 309 to 102 in favour of a retraining fund offer of €3 million, although they have stated it's not what they originally wanted, but after over 400 days, further action into the summer would not be viable. Ex-Fianna Fáil Minister and serving TD William O'Dea is in hot water again as further revelations emerge of his board membership of a UK-based housing investment fund. It has been revealed that in 2018, O'Dea objected to a local authority's social housing plan on the outskirts of Limerick City. Since then, the UK-based housing investment fund that he chairs has built 37 homes across the road from the site where the social housing development was proposed. Although O'Dea's objections to development was not against the law, the fact that he, as chair of the board of the private building fund, objected to social housing whilst promoting a private development in the same area is very revealing indeed. Stardust families have this week won a small but a very important battle in their campaign for an inquest into the Stardust nightclub fire, which left 48 young people dead. Although the state had ring-fenced funding for all other participants in an inquest in the last budget, no such funding was set aside for families. Since then, relatives of the victims such as Antoinette Keegan and Maris and Phyllis McHugh have campaigned for funding. And in an answer to Mary Lou MacDonald yesterday, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin confirmed that funding is being made available. Family members are also campaigning for reimbursement for the expenses and costs of their 40-year campaign, but there has been no announcement on this yet. On the morning after the government's decision to apply stamp duty to real estate investment trusts operating in Ireland, also known as REITs, R-E-I-T-S, the value of Ireland's largest REIT shares rose by 2.6% before dropping slightly. Share values in building companies associated with REITs also rose, in a sign that government actions to stop REITs buying up whole housing estates have fallen flat. Many objectors suggest the government had no intention of disincentivising them and that excluding apartments from stamp duty is evidence of that. 95% of all new build apartments were bought up by institutional investors in 2019. In fishing news, and the Irish South and West Fishing Producers Organisation have announced plans for a demonstration at Cork Harbour next week over the challenges faced by the fishing industry in Ireland. The organisation has made the announcement as other fishing organisations such as the Irish Fishing and Seafood Alliance have also said that protest action is on the cards. Further reductions in quotas and new weighing rules have forced the Irish fishing industry to mobilise over the last number of months. Failed ex-Fine Gael Housing Minister Owen Murphy, who announced recently his leaving politics with immediate effect, has been given a post as head of the Armenian mission of the Organisation for Cooperation and Security in Europe, or the OSCE. Murphy, whose legacy in Ireland is the worst housing crisis in the history of the state, has been appointed to oversee elections in Armenia. Murphy's appointment reflects the jobs for the boys system of international appointments from Ireland, and may also be seen as a reward for his unstinting defence of the privatisation of public housing in Ireland, leaving behind a terrible housing crisis. Finally, in Irish news, and Dundalk harpist Fionnuala Donlan has won the gold medal in the Sean O'Riordan Awards earlier this month. Fionnuala, 22, from the Red Barns Road in Dundalk, comes from a musically talented family and started playing harp at a very young age. She's won numerous All-Ireland medals and won the Senior Harp Trophy at Fleadh na hÉireann in Drogheda in 2019. Congratulations, Fionnuala. As the world cries out for an end to the bombardment of Palestine, President Biden's administration has not only resisted UN resolutions calling for a ceasefire on 3 occasions this week, but has also signed off on a missile deal with Israel worth $735 million. The deal will see Israel supplied with more weapons of destruction to use against Palestinian civilians and is a snub to calls by world leaders for a cessation of hostilities. Today, the bombardment of the West Bank by Israeli military forces continues. Small rocket fire has also been fired today by Palestinian militants, with reports of a bus being hit carrying Israeli soldiers on the way to the assault in Gaza. Meanwhile, a group calling itself Palestinian Action has occupied an Israeli-owned factory in Leicester in the UK that is producing drone parts for Israel missiles. The activists have occupied part of the factory, temporarily impacting production, and have taken up positions on the roof of the factory also. The occupation of that factory is one of the many protests across the UK and Ireland against the Israeli bombardment of Palestinian civilians, which continues and is ongoing. And finally, Venezuela has submitted a copy of a book by Biden aide Richard Nephew to the International Criminal Court as evidence and a confession of US war crimes. The book, titled The Art of Sanctions, is widely condemned as a how-to guide to causing political destabilization through economic sanctions and assault, often causing mass death in target countries. The Venezuelan government claims that the book by Richard Nephew is in fact a confession of the destruction he and his US governments, or various US governments, have caused around the world using sanctions. And that's all of the news that you won't see on TV this week, folks. As I say, we have a very busy show, so we'll cut out the chit-chat that we might normally have this week. And we're going to move straight over to Anna Kavanagh, who is joined by 2 guests who are very concerned about the level of obscenity in the English curriculum in secondary schools in Ireland. One of the guests is a secondary school teacher and the other a parent. And I think any parents out there should be particularly interested in this next section. Over to you, Anna.
Good evening. Earlier this week, former Fianna Fáil Minister Willie O'Dea wrote to the Education Minister Norma Foley expressing his concern at material on the Junior Cert and Leaving Cert English syllabus. And tonight I am joined by Wendi Drinan and Jackie O'Regan, who are going to chat to me now about the concerns that they have about this material. Wendy, if I can begin with you, maybe you might tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, Anna. Yes, my name is Wendi Drinan and I'm an English teacher, and I also teach history and Spanish. So I've been concerned about what I've seen happening in the English curriculum over the last while. And in January 2020, I was teaching in a school, and I had the opportunity at that point to review the prescribed list and pick some new material for my junior certs, which I hadn't done for a while. So, I was looking through, and then I started to research the material on the list, and that's when I became very concerned with a lot of the newer, more modern texts. So we're going to talk about that tonight.
Okay. And Jackie, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Anna, just to chat about this very serious issue. My name is Jackie, as I said, and I am a mother of 4. They're from 22 all the way down to 7, so I have every age going on in the house. And I suppose my background is currently, for the last 5 years, I'm in and out of schools teaching internet safety. And obviously my kids are in the school system, and I'm on the committee for the Irish Parents Review English curriculum. So that's why I'm involved in this process, just of parents who are concerned about what's going on with the curriculum.
Okay, so if I can go back to you now, Wendi, You mentioned there that you were teaching English and you began to review the material that was available for the Junior Cert English syllabus. So you can take up the story from there.
Okay, yes. So, yeah, and I began to get concerned at some of the content on the list. Yeah, and I had to choose a film for my junior certs, and out of the list that was given from the NCCA, the prescribed list, which is the list which teachers must choose their materials from, I felt there were only 2 films that I could possibly really choose for them due to the obscene content in the other movies. So anyway, the problem, Anna, just to explain, really going back a few years, since 2014, when books like John Connolly's The Book of Lost Things and Darren Shan's Cirque du Freak began appearing for the first time, that's when the selection of prescribed lists started gradually widening every few years since then to include more and more dark themed books that deal with topics like demonic possession, murder, suicide, and sexual violence in a violent, graphic, gratuitous way. And, you know, the scenes are very descriptive and detailed, and they're written in what can only be described as gratuitous. So, you know, a gratuitous way. So for any child who is not normally exposed to horror and violence and graphic sexual pornography, they are going to be potentially traumatized by this new material being introduced in the classroom under the guise of a relevant new curriculum. The sexual scenes are very graphic in many of the newer texts, and the messages that students are getting from some of these texts is that it's normal and good if they as minors engage in as much promiscuous sexual activity as possible. Like, for example, there are 5 texts I can think of in which minors are engaging in sexual encounters and activity with older adults. So, you know, we're talking about material that's been introduced to minors in the classroom. And just to clarify, we're not about censorship. I don't agree with censorship, and neither is you know, Irish parents reviewing this curriculum. They're not about censorship either. We're talking about age appropriate material for minors in the classroom. So that's the problem that we're dealing with here. So I can go on to mention some of these books if you want.
Yes, please do.
Okay, just to name some briefly, and then we'll go into a couple in more detail. The book called The Lauras by Sarah Taylor, which we're going to talk about in a bit, that has an oral sex scene spanning 5 to 6 pages. It's extremely descriptive and graphic. Then we have Louis Sakar's The Boy Who Lost His Face, which was a previously banned book in America and Britain from school libraries. We've got teenage boys there looking at photos of girls as young as 9 years of age and describing that they're getting a kick out of it, and a few other objectionable things in that book as well. Another book, if we have time, we're going to look at tonight, John Connolly's The Book of Lost Things. That is paedophilia and bestiality in that as well. We have a very recent new edition that came on in January and on the latest prescribed list that the NCCA has issued. It's Where the Crawdads Sing. It's a very popular book in female reading groups all around the globe at the moment, but it's, in my opinion, it's like a literary Mills and Boon book, you know, but it contains pretty explicitly described sexual scenes, and some of which are between a 15-year-old girl and an adult male. So yeah, so I'll talk about the Lauras. I think you might have a graphic there of the Lauras, maybe a picture of the book there. I'm going to talk about that a bit more now. I need to apologize in advance to the listeners. This is very disgusting, and I'm going to be saying offensive things here, but it's important that parents know what your children are being exposed to in the classroom. So, and this book is actually being taught in schools at the moment. I know of a couple of schools that are using it. In fact, one school in Dublin, when the dad heard about this, he went into the school and he emailed the school, and they took it off the curriculum straight away. The principal had no idea that this was being taught by the English teacher in the school. Okay, so The Lauras by Sarah Taylor. It contains, I'm going to read this from the blog site, irishparents.blogspot.com, which Jackie O'Regan is representing tonight. I took this review from there. The Lauras by Sarah Taylor contains a barrage of offensive words and phrases. Crotch, giblets in my pants, human fucking being, would you let me suck your dick, dick sucker and sucky, pissed off, asshole, shit, etc., etc., etc. There are 5 descriptive scenes of and references to masturbation. There are several scenes of physical violence, drug use, and scenes set up in strip clubs and drag clubs where the minor in the story lets an adult, quote, dress me like a doll. Every chapter is infused with references to sexual acts or sexual thoughts and has no other obvious theme or redeeming merit for the classroom. And like I said, on pages 56 to 60, that's a lot of pages, there's a graphically described scene in which a minor is subjected to oral sex in a car by an older man and decides afterwards she rather enjoyed the experience. This scene is explicit, describes in detail the man's penis, which they call another rude term, and what he expects the girl to do with his penis, what she does to it with her mouth and tongue, what it felt and tasted like, etc., etc. So there are some, you know, on the blog site there were parental reactions to that, and you know, parents were just couldn't believe it. They were saying it's unbelievable that this has been selected, presumably by a teacher on the NCCA. Someone is pushing to sexualize our kids. Let's see what else they say here. Yeah, it's just, you know, they're very against it because that oral sex scene is not in any way saying that it's a bad thing. It's almost promoting it. It's seen as almost like the girl enjoyed it and it's interesting, a positive experience. So it is promotion of this. It's not a way of teaching kids this is wrong or anything. So, well, I move on to another book here, The Handmaid's Tale. Again, this is quite a shocking book as well, but this is an extremely popular choice that teachers are using in the classroom. And one of the reasons is it's quite a lazy reason. One of the reasons is because there are a lot of notes available on this because it's a very popular choice at third level. And also the English curriculum has this on it and has had it on for a number of years. So the teachers like to, you know, use the notes. Anyway, Kate from Kerry, who did a review of this book, she says, this is a dystopian feminist tirade exploring and graphically describing sexual themes. Various scenes include rape, described as fucking, while the wife of the commander rapist participates vicariously in the rape. Sex and violence are constantly linked, and the handmaiden, the sex slave in the story, often fantasizes in her head about murder and suicide. At the end of the book, a mob of women are encouraged to viciously attack and kill a man, and scenes include a club where the protagonist is dressed up as a prostitute and talks with another prostitute while she considers the possibility of signing up herself. The book portrays men as useless except for sex and creating babies, and the mother-daughter relationship is portrayed as very negative. And Kate says, I certainly do not want my daughter exposed to this kind of filth, and I don't see how this can possibly contribute to the mental health of the boys in our society either. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. This is very shocking. Prepare yourselves. I'm sorry to have to read this, but parents need to know. Okay, quote, sometimes the movie she showed would be an old porno film from the 70s or 80s. Women kneeling, sucking penises or guns. Women tied up or chained or with dog collars around their necks. Women hanging from trees or upside down, naked with their legs held apart. Women being raped, beaten up, killed. Once we had to watch a woman being slowly cut into pieces, her fingers and breasts snipped off with garden shears, her stomach slit open and her intestines pulled out. Phrases like getting laid, on all fours, spread your legs, the guards getting hard, looking at the girl, and much, much more. So it's quite shocking material.
Yes, I have to say that this is, to me, quite shocking. And I am a former English teacher. I'm retired since 2018, and so none of that material was on the syllabus when I was teaching. And I'm listening to this and I'm saying to myself, is this really happening? Is this really on the syllabus? I think maybe if we bring in Jackie now. And thank you, Wendy, for that. Jackie, I think you have more material, have you, that you'd like to discuss?
I do, yes, Anna. And, I really want to say that we're not just taking little bits and pieces, it's not like a couple of lines or a paragraph. And what's fantastic about the review is that I know, listen, parents are busy. I know what it's like. I have 4 kids myself. Your child's book is on the list. You buy it. You may never know what's in it. This is fantastic because you can go on the irishparents.blogspot.com, see the book that your daughter or your son is studying, and you can actually go and read the reviews. So what I'm actually reading is reviews that are done by parents, and they're reading the books and then they're saying, right, this is what's in the book. And really just parents were getting more and more concerned and started adding to the blogspot. There's a new one out now. It's called The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. And again, this is only just just recently been added on, and it is, again, I'm going to read directly from the blogspot.com. This is somebody who actually read the book and reviewed, and you can see that it is a disturbing murder detective story. It contains various sexual scenes in which the female, who's called a femme fatale slut, is naked. So again, there's chapters 7, 9 and 24. So this is spread throughout the book. She's drugged, she's being slapped. I slapped her around a little more. She didn't mind the slaps. She's photographed while posing for a pornographic photo shoot in front of a pole containing a hidden camera by a bisexual man, Grieger, who organizes sex orgies and blackmails rich customers. He is also a buyer and seller of pornographic books. He runs an illicit porn lending library, a lending library of elaborate smut, and it just goes on and on. It is laden with sexual innuendo and sexually suggestive conversations between the character Vivian and Marlowe, and it has been heavily censored by publishers in the past. And this is, again, some parents that reviewed this are just said it is not a suitable choice for teenagers to study in the English classroom. And honestly, it's a lot. Like, this is not SPHE where you're going to study a particular subject, or they're going to deal with some life issue to talk. This is an English class. This is literature. They don't have a choice. You're sitting there with your peers, and it can be quite uncomfortable, I'm sure, for a lot of kids listening to this. So again, that's another book that's just come on stream.
Okay, and there are a couple of films as well that you want to speak about. Which of you would like to review the films?
Yeah, I can come on there, Anna. There's the Winter's Bone, and that's for the Leaving Cert. It's prescribed there, and it's by Deborah Granick, and it's R-rated. And it's just, again, it's a bleak, menacing backdrop, and the 17-year-old female Ree visits various people in turn who are either drug addicts, offering drugs to a minor, snorting cocaine. There are gory scenes. Again, there's the violence in this, animal skinning. In one scene, young Rees has a glass thrown at her face and is dragged by the hair and slapped by another woman. And there's scenes of vandalism, and again, they use a chainsaw to hack off a dead man's hands. And I know from going in and out of schools, I have to be extremely careful about what I say. There's words I can't use, and and I only rightly so. You're dealing with when you're talking about the internet. There's lots of things that are really difficult, but we've got to be inclusive of all the children in the class and the young people as to where they're at. And the verdict, again, on the Irish Parents Review curriculum said that it's not suitable for viewing in the classroom due to the violence and disturbing scenes involving animal skinning and desecration of a corpse. So that's one of the ones on the Leaving Cert.
Okay, and so if I can go back now to you, Jackie, have you anything to add to what, sorry, if I can go back to you, Wendy, I apologise. Do you have anything to add to what Jackie has just said?
Yeah, there are a couple of other movies I just mentioned very briefly, or novels actually. There's a book called Room by Emma Donoghue, and it's just similar in that there's the whole premise of that book is that a young woman is kidnapped and kept for 7 years as a sex slave, basically, and raped systematically. Even though it's not described gratuitously, those scenes, it's still occurring in the book the whole way through the book, and the young child who's born out of that is sitting in the wardrobe watching it all through the wardrobe chink in the door, But basically, we're giving messages here to the kids and the students in the classroom, like, what are boys going to think when they when they're studying a book like that it's okay to kidnap your next door neighbor and get free sex for 7 years, and that it's okay in the movie that Jackie just mentioned, Winter's Bone, that you can just go and grab a chainsaw and cut up a dead body, we're giving bad messages.
I would have to disagree with you there, in the sense that the message that the students are picking up may be that it certainly wouldn't be that it's okay to do this, but my concern would be that being exposed to that type of gratuitous violence and so on would affect their mental health. That would be my big concern.
Absolutely, Anna. Yeah. Now, I have conducted a comprehensive report on the curriculum, both the junior and the senior curriculum, and I spent 9 months writing an analytic report. I sent it to the Minister for Education, Norma Foley, on April 19th, and also 29 other TDs. So, and in that report, I do include a psychologist report and a psychotherapist report, and also some other, reports that are relating to young people's mental health. And yeah, I might quote a couple of things there. The psychologist said that at this stage in their lives, young people lack the critical skills to differentiate between valid information and that which can be harmful and manipulative. So that's quite an interesting perspective, and that they're also like sponges, and that they often attempt to act out what they're seeing, because out of maybe lack of self-esteem or just wanting to prove themselves. But if they're seeing and hearing things in the classroom as well, she made the point that they are going to, they can justify it. They can say, well, it's part of the school curriculum. The teachers are teaching this, so it must be something to emulate, something to act out. So,
okay,
good.
So our time, unfortunately, has run out. And I suppose the one thing that we have done tonight is to raise awareness. I'm sure there are viewers watching in who have children in secondary school and they weren't aware that this was happening. So that at least now, you are creating awareness and alerting parents to what is actually happening. So, Wendy, if I could just go back to you now for a final word, what would you like to see happening?
Okay, well, obviously we want to see these books and movies removed. Like over 52% of the senior novels have this sexual gratuitous stuff in them. And all the stats are there. If you want to look at the report, you can go to the blog site anyway. Parents, go to the blog site, irishparents.blogspot.com. And in the introduction section there, if you go to it, you press the read more. Click on read more, you can get the entire introduction, and it will explain exactly what steps parents can take to be proactive in helping to remove these offensive texts and films from the curriculum. There are various people that you can contact via email or write a letter, and there's even a sample letter up there as well. So Norma Foley, obviously the Minister for Education, there's Arlene Forster, who is the present CEO of the NCCA, where the prescribed lists are emanating from the NCCA. There's a number of people they can contact anyway. All the details and how to contact them, it's all there in the introduction to the blog site, irishparents.blogspot.com. And again, like Jackie explained, all the reviews of each individual play and novel and film are up there on that blog site. It's a really good resource for teachers and parents. And you need to complain to the school principals as well. Important to contact them as well.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. And now if I could go over to you, Jackie, for a final word.
I really appreciate the opportunity, Anna, to highlight this issue and really pleading with parents to get involved. It's still in our Irish constitution that the parents are the primary educators, and we need to get proactive about this and get involved and know what our children are learning and decide whether we feel it's appropriate or not. And there's a very comprehensive, as Wendy said, review on all of the books, more or less, that are there. And again, it's also important that we suggest alternatives, that we're not just saying, here's a problem, but there are actually even some good alternatives, because we do want, peer learning is a really fantastic way to learn and to raise issues that are not always so dark themed. Teenagers you spoke about mental health, they're going through so much. And even this year that we've been in, if we could just have some positive themes, good role models, good quality literature, and just bring back again just what it's all about, and just really implore parents to get involved and to just write to everyone, their local TD and the principals of the schools. Already some principals have responded and taken down some of the books, so I think this is fantastic, and we really appreciate the opportunity to just highlight this evening. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, Wendy and Jackie, I want to thank both of you because I know that you have done an immeasurable amount of research to bring all of this together. And I know, Wendy, that you have spent 9 months reading all of this material and writing up a review which you have circulated. And you have your, a really, really good website there. And we'll put the link to that website in the description box that accompanies this video so that viewers can access it easily. So I want to thank both of you this evening.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Over to you now, Finbar.
Wendy and Jackie as well. It's a long way from Wuthering Heights and Tom Sawyer and the likes. And I think in many books that I studied at school, such as Wuthering Heights, that the emotions and the passions of life were very much covered in those books without graphic vulgarity and description that goes beyond the beyond. So I thank Wendy and I thank Jackie for their vigilance, and Anna for having them on. About 6 months ago, we had two brothers, Sean and Martin Tracy, on the show. They were campaigning and part of a large campaign to save the Sperrin Mountains from a gold mine and a mining company called Dalridian, a Canadian company. Since then, our numbers have doubled and the campaign has increased and built itself up as well. But we did tell the lads at the time we'd like to have them back in 6 months' time to see where they are at. And they're joining us tonight. We know that we've got a lot of viewers that we didn't have before and followers watching. So we're going to go over some old ground again about why the Tracy brothers and why the community up in the mountains don't want a gold mine. Are you there, Sean and Martin?
Yes, Finbar. Good evening, Finbar.
Thanks very much for joining us. Lads, there's gold in them there hills. That's how I started your last interview. Just to brief people again that this Canadian gold mine started exploring about 10 years ago. They've done some groundwork. Their proposals, you believe, will be very damaging to your community in many different ways. Could you maybe fill us in on why you feel your community would not benefit overall from this gold mine?
I think, Finbar, the particular reason now what we would be concerned and why we would be against this proposal is this will be, if they get the go-ahead, the largest and deepest gold mine in Western Europe. And this all is going to take place 1,200 metres from the village in the local primary school and preschool, even closer to other houses belonging to families within the area. It sits between two prominent rivers which supply the drinking water for over 41,000 people. And as I say, all you have to do is look around the world to see what gold mining brings to areas. They don't bring nothing of benefit. They don't bring this fabled economic success that they talk about. It's got to the stage now, if you watch the media, that as third world countries are kicking these guys out because there's no benefit to the communities and everything else. If anything else, what we've seen is they've come in here and they've run roughshod over the locals and their opinions. And it seems to be the government and the departments and the powers that be and the politicians are quite happy to get into bed with these guys at the expense of the communities.
And how are the major political parties in the north of Ireland responding to your campaign? How is Sinn Féin and the DUP and the Alliance and all them? Do you think they're on your side?
To be honest with you, Finbar, they couldn't actually be any quieter. The DUP, Sinn Féin, SDLP, Alliance, UUP, this is that big a hot potato for them that they won't even mention it. There was an incident last week whenever there was a number of covert cameras put up around the area and Strabane and Derry Council area. Number of the MLAs who will be up for election next May or whatever date it is, jumped on the bandwagon, were so concerned, but whenever they found out that it was actually associated to what Deridian was doing, they went back in onto their rocks again. And the sad thing about this is this community's been doing this for 5 years. And in relation to the political parties, they've been non-existent. As I say up here, jokingly, their silence is deafening.
Okay. And have you any political support at all there?
Well, mainly we have a lot of support from the independents. You have people before profit. The people that really represent communities and working class communities. We have our own Fermanagh District Council. There's a number of excellent independent councillors was able to get seats there at the last election. You have Strabane and Derry District Council. We have Paul Gallagher, who apparently now is going to stand actually for the MLA position at the next election. Now, that is something massive, because at the end of the day, we all know how hard a worker the independents are. And for them to pick up, say, a seat in Stormont or whatever else, at least you know your voice is going to be heard. It's not going to be hidden behind a rock or a brown envelope or a wad of £50 notes, if you know what I mean.
Is it deflating as a community when your concerns are about the health of your children? You did speak before about the how near the chemical processing was to your community and to your schools. Is it a great disappointment to your community that political parties like Sinn Féin, like the DUP and all of them appear not to really care?
Very much so, Finbar. It's more than concerning. It puts fears in communities that we have now seen that this company has come in. It's waving money about, it's waving promises about, and the political parties, as I say, they've gone deaf to the pleas of the communities for support and help. What we're asking for here is a fair shout. Give us the equal respect as they're given to these companies. You know, the political parties have been happy to meet with these companies and everything else, the large parties, but yet when the communities request to meet these people before the last elections, they sent out lists of requests. You know, so many people at a certain location and at a time and everything else. They just made the communities jump through hoops to have their voices heard.
And did those meetings happen?
No. I think as well as that there, Finbar, you know, when we found out, this has been going 5 or 6 years, and we found out at the very, very start was this community here was described as the last Dundian reservation. And the reason being was that it was predominantly nationalist, Republican, you know, a Catholic community. It was probably about 97%. And actually the description came from, it was a unionist politician. And he says, look, he says, lads, he says, the last Indian reservation is your own chiefs that have cellulose down the river. He says, it's been picked for a reason, that area. There's only one party has control of it. There's not going to be two sides of the community opposing each other. And whenever you look into it, you see that. You actually see that. I know way back there was a senior Sinn Féin, and he was an MP at the time, actually was here to say that they had the political will to push this through in the area, and the men on the ground to make sure the locals didn't open their mouth. So that's the thanks that this community has got for supporting that party.
The last time you were on the show, you told us that there was levels of intimidation against community members who were opposed to the mine. Has that changed? Has that worsened? What's happening with that?
I think it's evolved, if anything. Now we have instances where the police are landing marked cars to people's houses late at night, making allegations of different supposed incidents that never took place on the words of these employees of this company. Now, the communities have made counterclaims in the past, numerous counterclaims to the police, and in most instances, they would tell us there's nothing to go on and they wouldn't even take statements from the community. But as I say, in the last week or two, numerous families have been getting visits from the police, basically threatening them from being within the proximity of the mine or their staff, looking even in the direction of the staff.
And what, have they actually tried to take any court cases in relation to?
Funny, just when you mentioned that, Finbar, I was served with summons there the day before yesterday, I think. They're now taking me to court next month for apparently, they're claiming it was criminal damage. Somebody apparently cut 2 cable ties, and they're throwing the full force of the law into trying to convict a member of our community for cutting 10p's worth of plastic. Now,
I was going to suggest maybe they were made of gold, but then again, they could afford that too, couldn't they?
But you see, this is the thing about it. You know, there's been a number of people hit with cars and everything else by members of their staff. At that incident alone, there was a man actually, they reversed the vehicle at speed into him, coped him over the bonnet, and whenever the actual police, we actually, you know, stopped him, because at the end of the day it was a criminal act that he had just done. We actually stopped him. They rang the police whenever they arrived. They neither breath tested him, they neither spoke to him, they just went in, found out that he was working for the company, opened the gate, waved him on and told us to stand back out of the road, and then started taking our information.
Okay. And over the period of the so-called lockdown, as it were, the pandemic, have they progressed with their work in any way, or has there been a stall there?
I think, to be honest with you, Finbar, it's been a big PR coup for them. They're running about claiming to be handing out sanitizer and handing out different things, minibus being available for doctors on call. These guys are vultures. You know, these are the actual, as they say, ideal ambulance chasers. You know, whenever there is serious issues like that, that really plays into their fore. You know, the funny thing was that there was a few months back, they actually gave £50,000 to Marie Curie. You know, that's like, you know, American tobacco giving Marie Curie £50,000, because it's well documented around the world the high incidence of different types of cancers and all associated with gold mining, and especially here where you have the large amount of chemicals and such like that will be involved in it, but not only that, but actually in the rock structure that they're removing from underground.
And near your schools?
1,200 metres from the schools.
Yeah, which is quite shocking in itself. In terms of the activism that your community has been involved in, but also a much broader community. I know that you've had international interest, you've had people from all over Ireland and further abroad getting involved. Is that still happening? Is that campaign still live?
Very much so, actually, Finbar. There's been support. All these community groups work very well amongst each other. And as I say, a lot of support for every campaign through the campaigns. And there's actually recently been now an All-Ireland anti-mining group set up, Communities Against
Injustice
in Mining. They're a relatively new group, but they have been set up now with all interested parties throughout Ireland.
Donegal, Cavan, Monaghan, you know.
Because the reality is that Dalridian have been doing a lot of marketing on social media platforms over the last few months, and I've noticed that it would appear they're planning to open mines in the Republic down here as well, and so I think that All Ireland Forum is pretty necessary. Have you heard any news in the grapevine in relation to that?
You see, the thing about that, Finbar, is that these guys don't actually mine. You know what they are? They're a vulture company. They come in, they claim to find these big deposits of gold, they hype up the value of it, they hype up the work, they hype up the investment for communities, and then they sell it to the highest bidder. Now, they can promise you whatever they want. They move on, and whoever comes in behind them, you know, that's a different scenario. So we made no deal with you, we didn't agree to this. In relation to them south, the way that they're working at the minute is, I think the whole of the island of Ireland is going to be decimated if these guys get to go ahead, because both the political parties in the north and the south are sitting waiting to use this as their how would you say, foot in the door. You know, they've all said they're open for business, but at the moment there's nothing. There's a small mine outside Oma. You know, at the minute they can't even raise money hardly to do extraction, whereas these guys is talking billions and millions. And then again, it's the same now. The Talus project apparently down around Waterford and all is kicking off currently, and that's to again detail everything that's in the land on the island of Ireland and sell it to the highest bidder.
Okay, so it was said by, I think it was a Social Democrat TD in the Dáil this week, that the city of Dublin has been abandoned by the government to the vultures and to the so-called cuckoo funds. I think it would be safe to say that the countryside is being abandoned to private interests, like companies like Dalridian again. Would you agree with that, that it seems to be a complete abandonment at this stage to privatisation?
Sadly, I think, Finbar, it's actually a worse scenario than that. You know, these guys is actively kicking people out of the countryside in relation to, you know, this last number of years they've set up, especially in this area, that, you know, you can't build a house. If your son or daughter builds a house, they have to wait 5 years before they can put in an application for another one. So the whole strategy, and you'll find that that's why they're focusing on Donegal through and down the west coast, is that they're trying to depopulate all these areas, you know, so there's less resistance to what these guys is planning. this is not outback Australia. This is not mainland Canada. 100 kilometres here is a big area in relation to driving. Over there, they could drive 1,000, 2,000, and it's only nothing. It's nothing thought of it. They're coming from big industrialized nations to a very small country where everything's on top of other, and their intentions is to use the same processes as what they're using when they fly in workers to the outback Australia, to man-made towns at a gold mine. And that's the sad thing. This is something that's going to decimate this whole country.
So they're applying a completely different model. When I spoke to you the other day, Sean, you were saying that you had a concern that Dalridian would start driving their projects in a much speedier manner now that the pandemic is lifting to a large degree. What do you think they're going to do, and what response are you going to give them?
I think now they have a lot of ground to make up because of the pandemic. They had to cease operations almost. And for these companies, profit is God. So they need to make up ground. So I would say they're going to try and accelerate. They're going to increase their political lobbying, which they've been doing all along anyway. And they're probably going to try and get the politicians to force something through to them. But the community's not going to accept it. We can't accept it. This is our home. They talk about this and NIMBYism and everything else. What else do we have? It's our homes. If we can't protect our home, then what's the point of it all? Yeah. So to say the communities will resist whatever they try.
I think there as well, Finbar, that myself, as last number of months, has been, how would you say, in for different questions by the police in relation to false accusations made against me. The last one I was on there was about 2 weeks ago.
In relation to this whole mining thing with already.
Yeah.
Just to be clear that you wouldn't call peeing on the street 2 weeks ago or something. It was about that.
Wasn't okay. Well, they didn't catch me at that, but
we'll say nothing.
But the sad thing about it was whenever I came out of interview, all of a sudden says there's somebody here who wants to speak to you, and I went, right, what did I do now? So they said it was a community sergeant, and the community sergeant actually came along and says, what are we going to, how are we going to sort this out up here? I says, how sort what out? And he says, move this thing forward. And I says, but sure, we've always said what way to do it, And he goes, well, what way do we do it? I says, whatever time yourselves or the companies actually come to the community, and this is the way I put it, and I'm not paraphrasing, we'll either get a wild kicking or you're going to get a wild kicking.
Okay.
So little to say the PSNI officer wasn't too happy to hear that. No. But it's got to the stage now where we have nothing to lose and everything to lose at the same time. Because if this thing moves ahead, not only is the Spartans, Tyrone, the North, but the island of Ireland is decimated. And that's the sad thing. You have TDs, you have MLAs, you have MPs and everything else, and they can find fault in everything that's happening locally. But at the end of the day, whenever it comes down to it, they don't actually do anything about it. As you say, it's like the vulture funds in Dublin. They'll all highlight it or whatever, but whenever it comes down to it, they're probably mostly shareholders in it, don't they?
Yeah, probably. So what your assessment is, and I just want to be careful with language for yourself, your assessment is that if it came to your members of your whole community being physically assaulted by security firms for these mines and by maybe even elements of state security on behalf, that probably the community would defend itself. I think that's what you're saying, is it?
At the end of the day, Finbar, we've all seen what happened in the Corrib down in Mayo and the gas pipeline and that. This community doesn't want that. This community is very clear in, we want to be left alone.
Yeah.
Leave us alone to live our lives. People have been custodians of this land for generations. They're here to bring their families up as best they can with what they have. And it just comes down to the simple message, leave us alone to get on with our lives.
And even in relation to that, Finbar, your basic human right is to stand up for your family and for your loved ones, for your neighbours and for your friends. This is what people doesn't understand. We didn't ask for this. 5 years ago, a bit more, this was thrown upon us, and we're the ones that's having, it's like anything else, it's like us jumping at the deep end. We're having to learn how to swim and everything, straight away. And that's the sad thing, because, as I say, whenever you don't have political representation, you know, you have a lot harder, bigger hills to go up, you know. And, you know, the sad thing about it is, I think that this is only going to get worse in relation to the pressures that this company and the political representatives that support them will be putting on the local troops in relation to the PSNI and whatever else.
But isn't the reality that if we were to personify this as a David and Goliath struggle, you guys being David and the Iridian being the giant Goliath, you guys are doing pretty well, and you haven't even had to cast any stones yet.
Not a single stone.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's a lot of hope there. If people wanted to find out how things are getting on with you, if maybe getting involved, even whatever, just to get information, what would they do?
We have one website. It's don't-us, all the one word.com. There's numerous Facebook pages. There's the Greencastle People's Office, the Save Our Sperns. There's Cameo, Communities Against Mining and OMA. There's
Love Screen.
There's numerous pages that can be found, but if they go to the website don'tminus.com, there's links to them all there.
Okay.
And just in relation to that, Finbar, too, you know, as yet, this community has not, there hasn't been one window broken by the community. The aggression has all come from the company and the supporters. So, you know, just to set that clear from the outset here, the community is doing an unbelievable job with the pressures that they're under, and you know, I think that speaks volumes to them. You know, the people are that concerned about their family and friends, yet they're still able to keep their head and fight the fair fight. You know,
it's very commendable.
Can I come in here, Finbar, please?
You can, of course, you can, Anna. Yeah.
I live here in Longford, and as I'm listening to you, I'm very, very concerned, because not many people know that the Longford Down Massif extends from North County Longford into Cavan, Fermanagh, Monaghan, Armagh, and it contains a thread or a vein of gold, and there's plans afoot to start excavating with the possibility of applying for a license to mine for this gold. So the problems that you're encountering there in the Sparrow Mountains is your problem today, but it may well be our problem in the years ahead here in Longford and into Cavan and Monaghan. So that would be a huge concern of mine.
Thanks for that, Anna. Guys, we're just tight for time. We're going to be going back to Anna now in a wee minute anyway. Sean and Martin, Tracy, once again, thanks for joining us. I would encourage people to get as much information as possible by linking in with their campaigns, even possibly getting involved if you feel up to it, remotely or on site. But this is a problem that's going to expand, and we want to keep watching it. Sean, did you want to come in to say something? I saw we movement.
Sorry, Finbar, in relation to that, what Anne was saying, if we stop these guys here, you know, there's numerous other communities on the island of Ireland that will then be the focus upon them. So, you know, this is the big thing. These guys need to be stopped across the island, not just in the Sperrins, in Tyrone. It has to be stopped completely.
Yeah. And that will mean putting a bit of pressure on our public representatives, who appear to be in a little bit of a bind between, yes, on the one hand, the lucre of gold, and on the other hand, the health and the well-being of the communities that they're supposed to represent. Sean and Martin, thanks a million for joining us. I have no doubt that we're going to have you back in a few months, hopefully with positive news or a call out or something like that. Have a good night, lads, and again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Finbar.
Thank you. We're going to turn over to Anna Kavanagh now, but just before I do, can I ask everybody who's watching to like and to share this program? It's one of the only fair, accessible and independent news and affairs, live news and affairs programs online at the moment. We really do our background work, and we try to present to you what's happening in the country in a fair and uncensored manner. And all we ask is that you like and you share what we're doing. We get nothing from this except the hope of a better world into the future. So on saying that, we're going to go to what I think is one of the country's best journalists at the moment. She is intrepid. She's always delving in where her nose shouldn't be, which is exactly what you want from a journalist. I'm going to pass you over to Anna Kavanagh for her news and views of the week.
You're very welcome to this week's News and Views for the third week in May, where I attempt to join up the dots to see the bigger picture in what is happening in our country. And tonight I'm going to be looking at how the GARDAI have made the headlines this week. I'll be looking at cuckoos and vultures, and finally the big story of the week, the cyber attack on the HSE IT. And so, to begin, Mark Tighe report in the Sunday Times that Drew Harris has apologised to the two Waterford boys who suffered life-changing injuries in an acid attack after GARDAI failed to consult them before deciding their attackers would be dealt with by a juvenile diversion programme instead of facing criminal charges. Clegg Abahiri and his friend OSullivan had acid thrown on them by a pair of teenage attackers in Waterford City in 2019. The families took judicial review proceedings against An Garda Síochána in the High Court, seeking orders quashing the decision not to criminally prosecute the attackers, but to refer them to the juvenile diversion programme instead. Last week, the two cases were settled with an apology from the Garda Commissioner, Drew Harris, and an agreement to pay all legal costs. And speaking of the GARDAI, last Thursday, Mick Barry, TD, asked the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar about the extraordinary powers given to the GARDAI during the pandemic. He said, and I quote him, "Young people up and down the country, but especially in working class communities, are reporting an increased level of harassment by members of the GARDAI. It is also a fact that we have seen very heavy-handed policing in recent weeks against protests, not least against the Debenhams workers in Waterford, Tralee and the Taoiseach's own area of Blanchardstown and Henry Street," he said. In response, Leo Varadkar said, "We have passed some extraordinary laws in this House and signed into law some extraordinary regulations I never thought we would because of the pandemic. We have curtailed people's freedom in a way I never thought we would in the past year or so. And we have given the GARDAI powers to do things I never thought we would give it the powers to do." And so last Monday night, depending on what reports you read, between 70 and 100 GARDAI, including the Public Order Unit, descended on the strikers who were protesting outside the Debenhams shop in Limerick City. And what ensued then was a major standoff. The protesters were removed, and then a lorry that had been waiting on Dock Road advanced to remove the stock, but it was stopped in Henry Street by people who lay down on the street in front of the lorry. What happened then was another standoff that lasted approximately an hour before the GARDAI then eventually withdrew and returned to barracks. And we look now at some of the scenes from last Monday night.
So workers are acting to prevent the removal of stock to secure their wages. On Henry Street in Limerick City Centre, the Gardaí have shut down the city to facilitate the removal of stock and rob the redundancy of the Debenhams workers after 412 days on strike.
Last night in Limerick, more than 70 Gardaí, including 20 Public Order Unit members, were mobilised to try to help strikebreakers past picket lines organised by Debenhams workers. The Gardaí sealed off 2 entire blocks of a city centre street and unsuccessfully attempted to kettle the workers and their supporters. They also pulled a worker with more than 40 years service towards that, treating him like a criminal. Now, I'm delighted to report that the workers and their supporters mobilised in such numbers and with such determination that the strike-breaking attempt failed for the third time. Last week, Taoiseach, I asked you about a similar Garda mobilisation in Waterford. You said that you weren't aware of it and would look into it. Taoiseach, there have been, by my estimate, more than 300 Gardaí mobilised for 7 separate attempts at strike-breaking in Limerick 3 times, Waterford, Tralee, Henry Street, Dublin and Blanchardstown, Dublin. I believe that you are very well aware of it. The programme for government states that protecting citizens is the founding duty of the state and policing has a defining role in this basic function. On Garda Síochána has a strong tradition of policing by consent, with deep-rooted connections in every community that enable it to carry out its work fairly and effectively. So, Taoiseach, my question to you, in the light of the difference between what's on the printed page and the reality in Limerick, Waterford, Tralee and around the country in recent weeks, why are Gardaí, who are being paid by the taxpayer to fight crime, being used as a battering ram against working people in a legitimate industrial dispute?
On the 20th of March 2020, the Health Act 2020 came into operation. Section 3 of the Act has been used by the Gardaí over the past 12 months to restrict our most basic fundamental human rights, such as making it an arrestable offence to leave our home at one stage unless we had a government-permitted reason to do so. The Cabinet agreed on Tuesday night last to extend the emergency powers given to the Gardaí to detain people, to restrict travel and fine people for breaches of mandatory mask wearing. You'd never think from these headlines that a new bill has to be drafted first to extend the COVID emergency laws that must then be debated and passed by the Dáil and Seanad, and then signed into law by the President before the 9th of June. What we're looking at here is a typical example of a press release being issued after a Cabinet meeting and the print media just copying and pasting without question the contents. Most people read only the headlines and you'll have to dig deep to get the finer details on the forthcoming bill. And I just want to remind you that there is still time to lobby your TD. The legislation, as I said, has to be drafted and brought before the Dáil for debate, and it must be voted on in the Dáil and Seanad before it is signed into law by the President if it passes through the Dáil. So I'm making an appeal to you to lobby your TDs in your constituency and appeal to them to vote against measures to extend these emergency laws, giving Gardaí extraordinary powers. And so now we move on to vultures and cuckoos, causing Ireland to move quickly back towards the 19th century landlord and tenant system of home ownership, all aided and abetted by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in recent decades. According to Killian Woods in the Business Post, more than 225 million euro of government funding that was supposed to be aimed at increasing housing supply was ultimately used by cuckoo funds to buy up houses and apartments before they could be put on the open market for regular buyers. German vultures, DWS, entered the Irish market recently and were involved in the 2 largest property transfers in 2020, which gives them a 7% share of the property owned by vultures. They spent €240 million last year buying 685 houses and apartments. Canadian vultures, Iris Red, are now the largest landlords, accounting for 24% of all rented properties in the country. And last night, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party banded together to defeat a Sinn Féin motion to tax these vultures. For example, Iris Red who controls a quarter of the Irish rental market, as I've just said, they paid no tax on 75 million euros profits in 2020. The government has created a vicious circle involving vultures being state-funded to buy up houses, to rent back to the state, to house the people forced onto the social housing list because they can't compete in the marketplace with these vultures. Dún Laoghaire Council is negotiating to lease out all 34 apartments and houses in the Heronwood estate in Cabinteely for 25 years at a cost of €800,000 a year. This is a total of 20 million. Yet, these properties only cost 18 million to buy in the first place. NAMA, a state body, is selling apartments in Malahide to UK vultures who may lease them back to the local authority at exorbitant rents to house the people who were excluded from the bidding process. We'll now take a look at Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett raising the issue yesterday in the Dáil.
Taoiseach, the government's announced proposals to deal with the activities of the vulture funds and the cuckoos are hopelessly inadequate, completely pathetic, and I don't think are actually a serious attempt to deal with these cuckoo funds at all, because in reality the government is beholden to these funds and is deeply implicated in bringing them into the housing market. The 10% stamp duty will not act as a disincentive. These firms have the funds at their disposal to outbid ordinary working people. They won't apply to apartments, which is actually where most of these cuckoos and vultures are active anyway. The planning regulations similarly won't apply to apartments. They won't apply to all these strategic housing development planning permissions that are already in play, a flood of which have gone in through the last period. So they're not a serious attempt, and to use a phrase you often use, these proposals will not deliver one extra affordable house for working people or make the unaffordable rents in the housing sector unaffordable, and neither will they deal with the scandal that was revealed at the weekend. And of course this explains why you're not taking serious action against the vultures and cuckoos, because the state is up to its neck in investing in these cuckoos through the Strategic Investment Fund, formerly called the National Pension Reserve Fund. And something that hasn't come out, I've just discovered, this includes investment in Bartra's co-living proposal in Dún Laoghaire. The state is building box apartments with Bartra. It's investing in apart hotels, short-stay apart hotels. This is unbelievable. And then in many cases, these things will be leased back to local authorities. Do you know, or they'll be funding the profits of these investors through HAP payments. 40% of all HAP payments are going into the pockets of corporate landlords. Read this. This is what these funds are saying about the profits they can make through deals of leasing with the local authority. This crowd is called Housing Together. They boast government-backed leases, 10 to 25 years, unrivaled covenant strength, net initial rental yield of 5%, ideal for investors seeking high income at low risk, opportunity to lock in rents and link to inflation, no management of tenants, no rental collections or chasing arrears, no internal maintenance, no voids, no letting fees, no advertising costs, no ongoing refurbishment costs. Why? Because the local authority will pay for all that, and at the end of the 25 years, the vulture fund will own the property, not the state. So we are paying for it, and the vulture funds and the cuckoos are running off with the profits, and we have nothing at the end. No security, no affordability, no affordable rents. It is a scam and a swindle on mafia-style proportions.
You've been looking there at Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett speaking about the cuckoo and vultures yesterday in the Dáil. And finally, to what has been dominating the news for the last week, the cyber attack on the HSE. Tusla's CEO Bernard Gloucester spoke to Brian Dobson on RTE's Radio News at 1 on Monday. We learned that Tusla's operating system and data storage is hosted on the HSE platform. The National Childcare Information System, established by TUSLA at a cost of €10 million in 2018, is hosted on the HEC platform, which also has the mother and baby home files, 20,000 open cases on child protection, and 6,000 files that are pertaining to children in foster care. The Social Democrats issued a statement today saying that at yesterday's briefing of opposition leaders on the cyber attack, TUSLA wasn't mentioned once. There's huge question marks over the transferring and sharing of information between what is supposed to be two independent bodies. And secondly, will the cyber attack be used as an excuse for files going missing when TUSLA and the HSE are being sued? According to Deputy Padder Tobin, TUSLA had 365 data breaches in 2020, which is practically a breach for every day of the year. Daniel McConnell reported in Monday's Irish Examiner that Minister Anne Rabbitte is to extend the State Commission of Investigation into the abuse of Grace to include the 46 other children in the foster home to see if they were also abused. The inquiry into Grace being left in a foster home for 20 years and for 13 years it was known by social workers that she was being sexually abused. The inquiry was set up in 2016. Marjorie Farley was to have completed the inquiry by 2018, but was given several extensions and still hasn't concluded this investigation that has cost €7 million so far and rising, with the rent for offices costing €22,000 a month. In April 2017, the High Court approved a €6.3 million settlement for Grace and described her treatment as a scandal. In June 2017, then Chief Executive of TUSLA, Fred McBride, appeared before the Joint Committee on Children and Youth Affairs and admitted that some staff involved in the care of Grace were still working for TUSLA. We learned last week from Deputy McBarry that the inquiry into the collapse of Anglo-Irish Bank has cost €10 million so far, with the final cost expected to exceed €30 million, with some reports that it could be nearer €70 million. Mick said, and I quote, "More than €1,500 was spent on tissues. I find it hard to get my head around that." Now, that's an average of €80 a month on tissues. The Concorla Riley remarked, "It seems like there must have been a lot of behind the scenes tears being shed if all those tissues were needed." And if that is not enough to drive you to tears of anger, I doubt anything will. I want to thank you most sincerely for watching all the way through, and I would make a special appeal to you to please share this video and get the news out to a wider audience. And as always, I like to leave you with a question to ponder in the days ahead. When are we going to reach a tipping point where the majority of people in Ireland will finally say, enough is enough?
It's a good question, Anna, as always, leaving us with something to ponder over the week. But just looking at the show tonight and a lot of the stories coming out, we do have good public representatives within Dáil Éireann. They're small in number, and on certain matters in particular, most of us would agree, whether it's the banking and the vulture funds, the health system, things like that. And it would be wonderful to see these deputies being able to put their party politics aside and their egos aside at times and to come up with some kind of a collective agreement on moving this country forward. And so hopefully that will be the answer to your question in the next election, possibly even. Anna, go on ahead.
To that, I would like to add that there is some excellent journalism out there. As you can see, I've brought together the news that was all in mainstream media over the last week. And that news has been brought to us by journalists. And I would like to pay tribute to people like Mark Tighe, who I quoted in the very first report there on the acid attack and the young boys in Waterford. So, yes, I think we have to pay tribute to good journalism as well.
And I think it's really important that we come to understand that we're not going to agree with anybody about everything. For instance, a journalist may have written a story you didn't like one time, but when you look at their core work, is it insightful? Is it doing what it should do? And the same with politicians as well. We're not going to agree on everything, but if we can agree on the most important and the basics. Anna, I'm going to leave you now if you don't mind. I'd like to just give some positive news. Maybe just stay for a second, Anna. As we went online live, news has broken from Palestine, Israel, that there has been a truce established. It was negotiated by the Egyptian representatives at peace talks. The truce and the ceasefire is going to begin at 11 GMT this evening. So that is in 40 minutes, just under 40 minutes. I'm really thankful to the people, happy for the people of Palestine and the people of Israel as well, who've been going through a terrible, terrible time over the last few weeks. So we can leave on a positive note this week. I'd like to thank our guests, Wendy and Jackie, Sean and Martin. I'd like to thank our producers, Danny and Stephen Kerr in our Dublin studio, Stephen McDowell in our Dundalk studio, and of course my co-host Anna for what has been a very busy, but I hope a very insightful show once again. Join us next week, 9 o'clock for Double Down on the Irish Inquiry. Have a safe week, folks.